Welcome to the Inspired Riding Audio Summit. We're going to be talking about the benefits of intuition in the horse world. Today I have with me Susan Tenney. As the co-founder of Elemental Acupressure, Susan Tenney has been teaching and practicing 5-element acupressure, shiatsu, and EnergyWork for animals for the past 30 years. She has worked with horses and pets at all levels, from working with the United States Equestrian Team and Swiss national team at World Cup events to helping rescues. Susan feels strongly that 5-element acupressure is for everyone, not just the experts. This you can do it attitude carries over into her classes where she delights in demystifying Chinese medicine and 5-element theory for all animal lovers. She currently offers a wide range of online and on-site courses, from starter courses for beginners to her full certification program for those who wish to practice professionally. Susan, thank you so much for being here.
It's a total delight.
Well, let's get right into the questions. What do you love most about working with horses?
Well, I think horses are, they're quite magical, right? So you have this incredible ability to connect to this animal that is huge and powerful, and they can be fast and kind of take your breath away, and yet they're willing to connect with us humans. It's really quite extraordinary. And I think a lot of us get hooked when we're little girls, and it was even more so, right? Because they were these huge, amazing things that we would look at and just feel like, oh, they just are the best. And so I think my favorite thing is just that we can connect with another one of the creatures on this planet so profoundly and intimately that it is a really powerful interaction.
I love that so much, and I so agree. It's amazing how we can connect with them. Susan, what's something that a horse has taught you that's changed your perspective?
I think one of the things that is powerful for me to watch is that when horses are very much in the moment, so they will have their traumas in the past and they will have their things from the past, but most of the time they are in the moment and they will ask that we be present as well. So as humans, we tend to be really in our heads. We have our grocery list, or we have whatever nonsense is going on in our head, an argument with a coworker or whatever. And when we come into the kind of the aura around being with a horse, it shifts, because when we're with an animal that's present in the moment, it kind of draws us into accessing that as well. And I think that's part of why when we are in that bubble, we feel so good, because we're actually closer to our true essence. And this isn't in every moment. You can absolutely have those moments when you're not tuned in and things are going bad, and all of that can happen. We're human. We're definitely fallible. But I think we have a better chance of accessing that feeling of who we really are, and that sense of having someone see us deeply. They can tell from our body movement. They can tell from all sorts of cues that we don't even realize we're giving off, how we actually are, not the face that we put on. And I think that encourages us to know ourselves better, and to also realize that it's safe to be seen. It's safe to be in relationship, in deep relationship with another being. And that is powerful. When we go through so much of our life kind of not connected to all of that, if you're doing that on a regular basis, that's really good for the heart and soul.
Absolutely. So I would think that being around them just helps remind you to be in your body and be connected to your soul.
Absolutely. In fact, we teach a class in grounding. So there's everybody has their own way to do it, and they're all good. Anyway, whether you're sitting for meditation or doing Tai Chi, or you're doing the grounding techniques that we teach in the class. grounding's just good. But I remember talking to a student who used to say, like, oh, well, I don't need to take your grounding class because anytime I'm around the horses, I'm grounding. I'm like, yeah, but that means you're grounding through them. And you're not learning to ground through your own actions. And she kind of, her chin kind of hit the floor, right? She's like, oh, yeah, that's right. And so she took the class. And it was amazing to see the transformation, because all of a sudden she was grounding first and then approaching the horse. And her interface changed totally because she was part of that process of helping both of them feel better in the world instead of coming them to be fixed by the horse's energy. And so I think we can forget that. We can just like kind of coast or ride the wave of their awareness. But I think that's not the point. The point is for us to recognize that's what that feels like, and then to take steps so that we can initiate it on our own, in our own life, and even to bring that in to the horse's experience as well, because we come to them more relaxed, more grounded, more focused on where we want to be. And that, there's not much that's better for us than getting in that moment, getting grounded, getting settled and in our body and breathing right and all of that. And God knows it's good for us too.
Oh, sure. And the horses appreciate that 1,000 times more. Yes.
Absolutely. They know instantly, right? And that's why I think some of us, when we encounter animals in our daily lives, whether it's, you go over to a friend's house and the cat comes right up to you and, oh, that never happens, whatever it is. I think that's because we learn how to be present, and the animal recognizes that, like, oh, well, I want to be hanging out with her because that's a state that's actually very comfortable to be around. And then you're doing it right, and we all need to practice. We all need to practice for sure. But it is something that is learnable, and it makes our everyday, mundane life a little more relaxed, if nothing else.
Absolutely. That also reminds me of one of my very first courses. I taught about getting present and why horses always gravitate towards the trainer. And I joke and call it the trainer magnet. It's because they're in their element teaching,
Yes.
really happy and grounded and connected to their passion and their love for horses. And so the horse sees that and says, can I hang out with you? Because this student's not really here,
Exactly. Yeah. And often the rider, they're learning a new skill. So there's some level of, you've got to be a little bit outside your comfort zone if you're taking on a new skill or you're taking on whatever it is that you're learning. And I think although in the lessons, our ultimate goal is to have those flow moments when, you're basically, the centaur, the two of you are completely one. But so often in a lesson situation, the person may be helping you to get there, maybe by the end of the lesson or whatever, but you often don't start there. And so if that horse is gravitating toward the trainer, I think a lot of the times it's just like you say, because, the rider is in that more kind of change state because they're open to the catalyst of the trainer changing something about how their skills are or their performance or whatever. And the trainer's not there. They're, like you said, they're in their element. They're like, oh, I have this job that I love, that I'm out doing this wonderful thing. So yeah, absolutely. That is really good insight.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to actually talk to the students and explain that to them so that way they can strive for that and get connected, even though they're learning so many skills at once. I know it's such an endeavor. So, Susan, how has your intuition helped you when interacting with horses or even with clients?
Intuition is funny because I think when we are kind of thinking about intuition, which is, a different state, right? We tend to think about it as something that's mystical or esoteric or, like maybe we read fantasy books or science fiction. Like there's this element of otherness to it. And we tend to see it as outside or extra. We even call it extrasensory perception, And I think the biggest thing that I want to talk about is that Intuition, when I'm with myself or when I'm with a horse or when I'm with another person, the best way to tap into all that is to realize how mundane it is. It's normal. It's just your normal state of being. You may not recognize that, but there's so few people who can't stop for a moment and think, like, yes, I have had walking into a room and knowing something that I shouldn't have known, or communicating something to my horse just picks up on it. Those kinds of things are quite powerful. And so I think what the horses show us, whether you're doing animal communication or something that is, a different form, is just how average and kind of boring it is. I mean, not in a bad way, but it's just every day. And the more that you start to access that with the animals in your life, and the horses, they think in pictures. They're always sending us information. And so just, professionally, I do acupressure and massage. And so during a bodywork session with an animal, there's often this flood of information that comes in. And again, it was realizing over time that it's always there. Like, it's always there. And you may not tap into it, but it's kind of like picking up the phone and listening to what's on the other side. It's always been there. And so it was powerful to realize that it wasn't like, I don't have to pull a sword out of a stone or have the goddess give me some great, no, everybody has it. And so it is a powerful journey to realize that intuition and all of these things that maybe aren't acknowledged in your everyday life and your everyday people is actually really normal. And that's powerful, I think, because it allows, I think people tend to think that you have to be gifted, like you have to have special gifts. And maybe the animal communicator, and that's her profession, and she's really cultivated those skills. She may have higher level of skill, but that access, that's for everybody. And that's a powerful lesson that I think horses have given me. And just being around them, it all comes up.
I love that perspective. And I'd love to know, how do you receive the information from the horses? Do you see it in pictures? Do you hear it? Do you feel it? Do you just have a knowing?
I know from talking to my students that, there's a real range of how people kind of receive. And I think there's also, we tend to have judgment that I don't have it the way somebody else does, and so I must be doing it wrong, or I'm not good enough. I constantly have students saying, oh, well, I can't do that the way Susie does, and it's just not that way. And once we tap into it, we realize we have our own vocabulary for how it comes through. It's almost as if we have a filter or a translator mechanism. So you're receiving things, and it ends up being in your language, even though it's coming from someone else, the horse or some other source. And so personally, I tend to get kind of a stream of words, like I was speaking to someone, and it's very reliable. Like, it's pretty good, and I'll talk to the person. And I don't consider myself a professional animal communicator. In fact, in our program, it's my husband who does more of the psychic stuff, and I'm more of the bodywork gal, because we all have our places where we really excel. But I get all those words coming in. But what I'd love to hear, to really experience for the students, is realizing just how different it can be. Just like my mother, for example, for years was hearing sounds and tones. And there was a whole language that she had worked up around it. She thought everybody had that. And she asked me once about it. I'm like, well, I don't hear that when I'm touching an animal. And she's like, doesn't everybody have these songs going on it? I'm like, no, they don't. And so she thought she was deficient or wrong or whatever. And I was like, no, everybody has their own beautiful way of receiving through their own translator mechanism. But mine is definitely words. I definitely feel, see, think. It really is almost like a thought process. But it's the stream that is words.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd love to hear if you have a transformation story that occurred as a direct result of trusting your intuition, either with your horse, yourself, or another human that you are helping.
I would say that one of the biggest transformations for me continues to be to trust that what I'm doing with horses is where I'm supposed to be. I've been doing this for 30 years, and in the early 90s, doing acupressure for horses was kind of a laughable phrase. Like, people would hear what I did and they would literally laugh out loud. Now it's kind of like, lots of people do various kinds of body work, and it may be off the beaten path for some, but, so knowing to trust that the dreams I was having, and I had a lot of them, I had endless. I think the universe was really like, we got to give her a lot of dreams because she's not trusting us. So we're going to just bombard her so she can't not follow this path. And I had even had some kind of remarkable, amazing, coincidences, quote unquote, happen. Like where I went to study shiatsu was in the convent across the street. This is in San Francisco, across the Mission. And I realized, oh my God, Saint Francis, who, if out of all of the saints, is most associated with connecting with animals, I'm basically studying in the building that was once the convent. I mean, little things like that, but it all lined up to say, this isn't your idea. You're not just making it up. You actually are supposed to do that. And I think all of us, even someone like me that's been doing it for 30 years, we still doubt and we still are afraid, and we go through times when maybe the business isn't where you want it to be, or the results that you're getting with clients isn't what, whatever. We all go through our trials and travails. But learning to trust that intuition, learning to trust that destiny that we have, whether it's professional, personal, doesn't really matter, but to trust that what you're doing is powerful and correct and just where you're supposed to be, that is a continual learning for me. So I hope people, if anything, they hear that it's not like you have those doubts, you start your business or you start working with things and it all gets obvious. It's not. It's a continual cycle. And I think trust is the thing that I continue to be both blessed with, having those experiences of trust, but still continually tested on the trust as well. It's that mix. And I think it's kind of the healer journey that we all take. You don't have to be a professional to be on the healer journey, and just be seeking transformation and healing, both for ourselves and those in our lives, like the horses. It's a powerful path, but it's a good one. It's a good one.
It is, and I'm so grateful that you're on it, because you're definitely a huge inspiration in the horse world.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So, what lights you up and inspires you immensely in the horse world?
Well, like I said, I've been at this for a very long time, and the world has really changed. And I know we can always look at the horse world and see more things that need to change, certain kinds of practices that we take with horses that still need a lot of improvement. There are still horses that are suffering. I don't want to minimize that at all. I know that that's there. And yet, having said that, I would want to acknowledge that in the past maybe 40 years, because I definitely wasn't there at the start of all of this, but I was there 30 years ago, but I would say in that 70s and 80s, we had this real kind of renaissance begin by some pretty powerful people that brought East Asian medicine like acupuncture to the horse world and brought herbalism, all of these kinds of things that, it's big business now. There's all these supplements and methods and tools and all these things that we kind of take as like that's just part of the horse world now. I think what inspires me is realizing just how far we've come, and also realizing, okay, that's great, and we have to keep working. We have to keep seeking the best for horses, because ultimately they are living in our world, whether we like it or not. Most of them are not out on the range, and even those that are out on the range are having to live with humans in their situation. And so I think what inspires me the most is just realizing that we have come really a long way in opening to alternatives that are the perfect add-on complement to Western medicine, which is so powerful and wonderful. And God knows, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but they needed more options. And what inspires me is to see how many of these new ideas about training and being with people and giving horses autonomy and letting horses be unridden and, taking alternate ways to keep them healthy. It's a pretty inspiring time to be involved with animals in general, but horses, absolutely.
It truly is. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that we have so many possibilities out there. And it's so true.
Many.
Yeah, we need to keep evolving and keep learning as much as possible.
Yeah. I know, my students will think that like, oh, you've been doing this for 30 years. So, you must have this level of attainment. And yeah, of course we have certain skills that we build. You reach about the 10-year point and you're like, okay, I know my skill. But if you stop there, like who wants to stop? You get there because you have passion for it. But what I think the students continually say is like, you're still learning? Do you keep learning? And that's what's inspiring, is knowing you can't get to the end point with this. It's a constant transformation. And so, for instance, like there's so much being learned about insulin resistance with horses, for example. That wasn't a thing in that way when I got started. So to think that I know everything no, we're always learning from each other and expanding the amazing resources that we have to keep these gorgeous creatures happy and healthy. And that's a really good thing. That's a really good thing.
Absolutely. So, Susan, what's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self for encouragement?
Ooh, one thing that I would give myself. And I think I just go back to trust. I think for me, it continues to be a journey of learning trust. We all have our places where we go. And for some people, it's anger or frustration or irritation. My place is anxiety. So that's where I go when I go off balance. And so I will worry, I will doubt, I will have anxiety that whatever part of my life isn't right for whatever. And so I think what's been powerful again is seeing that every time I made a bold choice, because it was driven by my heart, not by some crazy idea, but I was having the dreams, or I was having all the signs line up or whatever, and learning to trust that. I'm involved in a lot of these kind of online business type groups and everything. You encounter a lot of people who have gone through very different paths. And so many women end up in careers they don't like or lives they don't like, and kind of come into their 40s or 50s and say, oh, I've got to transform my life because I've got to finally live my life. And I think what I've discussed with my husband, who's been on this journey with me, just lockstep, I mean, we really have done this together, is realizing that because we made those hard choices, and we made those choices that were unconventional, and our parents thought we were crazy, and our friends said, oh my God, you hear all the naysayers. But like my heart is telling me that this is what we are supposed to do. I know it in my gut. That doesn't mean you don't doubt, but there's a part of you that knows. And taking that, I have no regrets. And I don't know a lot of people in my life that can say I have no regrets. And so I know that that's actually pretty common for people that really follow their heart's message, whether it's with horses or, whatever it is that they do. If you follow that and really trust it the best you can, maybe not at 3 a.m. when, those moments, but for the big part, you can get to that place where there are no regrets because you're really living the life that you're supposed to. And that can be started at any moment. I was lucky enough to have those times happen around 28 and still living it all these years later. But we can start it. I see people make the exact same kind of transformation when they're 60. And it's just the same. When you really trust that, even when you're shaking in your boots, it is, you get to serve who you want to serve when you follow your heart. And you really can serve the horses or serve your community or whatever that service level is. And it's powerful.
It truly is. I love that advice. Follow your heart, trust your gut, right?
Totally. And to realize that you'll still have fear. I think people think they have this idea that you won't have fear. Of course you're going to have fear. It's a scary thing. But you can have that trust and that fear in the same breath and still go forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. And being able to face your fear and dissect why it's coming up is really powerful as well.
Yes, absolutely. Was it something you learned growing up? Is it, where's that coming from? And, I could talk a half an hour on that, but I won't.
Absolutely. Well, I've made 2 courses about it, and now I'm a hypnotherapist for it, so I totally get it. Oh my goodness. So here's a fun one. What does the phrase, "May the horse be with you always," mean to you?
Well, I think horses are for us something that is as real and true. And again, it's kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about how when you come into that bubble that surrounds a horse, I mean, HeartMath has even really talked about that bubble extending about 10 feet in a bubble around the horse. So it's measurable. It is an actual force. But we can certainly feel it whether you measure it or not. It's there. Just being around horses feels good. And yet it's not the only place in our life that we can have that. And so we recognize what that feels like, being in the right place, both physically on the planet, geographically in the right place, but also being in the right place in our heart, in our mind, in our spirit and soul. And I think horses teach us better how to access that. So we recognize it. It becomes something that's familiar, something that we want more of because it feels good to be in alignment, whatever that means for you. And so to be with the horse is very much like, talking about the horse. And my favorite talk with Yoda, of course, is from the second movie. I'm dating myself, like I did watch these in the theater. The place where he says it's this, Yoda talks about how the force is this energy that surrounds all of us. It is through us. It is everywhere. And I may tap into that very specifically through the acupressure, because in East Asian medicine, we're going to call that qi, and we're going to work with that very specifically, but it doesn't have to be through that technique. It can be through Reiki. It can be through just breathing. Right. But being with horses means being in that alignment with that natural energetic flow. And I learned that with horses. I learned that when I was, 6 years old and riding horses that were too big for me and didn't care because I was riding. All those early memories taught me what it feels like when things are right. And so I take that into my life, the whole rest of my life, whether I'm with the horse or not. I'm always with the horse because I'm always with the horse, because I know it's in me and around me and through me. It's who we are. It's natural.
Yes. I love it so much. Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
So is there something else that you would like to share that I have not asked you?
I think for me, the thing that I know is that being with horses allows us to know ourselves better. And so I think there's a lot of focus in what I call the muggle world, like...
We've had these conversations.
If you've read the Harry Potter books, it's all about there's the magic people and the not so magic people. And let's face it, magic isn't all of us, but it's a book. But if you're in the Muggle world, there's this idea that horses are, let's learn this training, let's try a different tack. It's very kind of mundane like that. But I think what I love best about horses is how they transform us and how they bring out the best in us, or have the ability to bring out the best of who we are. And by being with them, we realize more who we are. How did I handle my horse losing his mind? Not so well. I lost my crap as well and got angry and I hit him. Oh, I need to change that within myself. And so watching this interaction that we have with the horses teaches us to be better people. And we take that into the rest of our life. And to realize that we are beings that thrive in when we allow transformation. If we get stuck and don't allow that transformation, we're not truly who we are. And there is an essence that never changes, but everything built around that essence is always changing. And so what I love doing is tapping into how these interactions with our horses, our dogs, our cats, and everybody in our life allows us to transform into our best selves. And that is a powerful process.
It truly is. Susan, thank you so much for your beautiful insights today.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I love being with like-minded folks who allow us to think about the things that mean so much to us.
So do I. Well, thank you again. And I'll close with, may the horse be with you always.